We are recording. As we pick back up, talking about the legislative branch, do you remember how old a candidate had to be to run for the House of Representatives?
$25,
25, right? And then how about Senate?
$30.
30. We haven't got to the executive branch yet, but does anybody perchance know how old you have to be to run for president?
5.
How old?
25
No,
Wait, for
I
president?
for president.
35.
35.
35, right. Well done, squires. Padawans, apprentices. All right, so who can run for Congress? Or we already know who can concerning age and citizenship. But who usually runs? Talking about specifically the House, you would have a wider, diverse group of people probably who are running for House of Representatives, simply because that's the lowest level, we would say. And it was designed that way so that there would be more of them, and they're more closely connected with the citizens because they come from smaller districts within states. So if someone meets those criteria as far as age, citizenship, and they don't have a criminal record, then they could run for House of Representatives. But there are some things that might eliminate a lot of people. For example, you have to have money to run a campaign. So that would probably eliminate quite a few people. Now, a big group of people who run for the House or the Senate are called incumbents. Incumbents are those who have already been in office. Or, for example, Governor Stitt. He is the incumbent governor. He has been governor for 4 years, and so he's running again as the incumbent. So a lot of people who are elected are incumbents. Being an incumbent gives one an advantage. You can see here on this slide, usually around 90% of elections are won by those who are already in the office. Then you can see the figure down here with the graph. How many incumbents in the House win? And usually you can see it's more, those that are in the House of Reps are more successful than those that are in the Senate. Oh, excuse me. And here's why incumbents have some advantages. First of all, you can see that they're going to get advertising. Incumbents send mail to their constituents. And if you read the chapter, you'll notice a term called franking, which is a privilege that our congressmen have. Franking is simply where they can send mail without having to pay postage. So that's one advantage that incumbents have, is they can advertise themselves by sending brochures and political cards or mail outs, which some of you might go home today and look at the mail that your parents got on the counter there, or wherever they put the mail on the table, and you'll probably be able to find some political ads from Stitt or Hoffmeister or your senator, your rep. So incumbents get to send all that mail for free. That saves them on their budget. They also have a built-in staff. I believe there's around 12,000 congressional staff members. We're talking on the federal level. So if someone becomes a senator or a representative, they are allowed to hire so much staff, aides, who will help them in their responsibilities. And so that helps them when it's time for reelection. They also get so much money to travel back and forth from their home state to Washington, D.C. They also would have privy to more television coverage. So that's one advantage for incumbents. Incumbents have credit with the people that they've served for their 2 or 6 years, depending upon whether it's a senator or a rep. Which one is elected to a 6-year term? Senator or rep? Anybody? Anybody? Bueller? Fry?
It's senator.
Senators, yes. 6 years. So representatives have 2-year terms. That's a reference to Ferris Bueller's Day Off, a wonderful 1980s movie. So they can claim service to those that they've served for their 2 or 6 years, whether they've done individual, and whether they've worked specifically for individuals in their constituency. That would be casework, because not only do they represent everybody within their area, but you and I can write or contact our representatives, our senators, and ask them for specific help in maybe our situation. An example from my own family is when my son was born. He was born 7 weeks early, and he had to be in St. Francis neonatal ICU. And my wife had to go in 7 weeks early because her water broke unexpectedly. And we went into Poto Hospital, and little bitty county hospital didn't have the facilities and things to deal with this situation. So my wife's doctor sent her to St. Francis. Well, St. Francis was not on our insurance's HMO. So the insurance was not going to pay Let me see. Well, let me back up. I think I had separate insurance at the time. Well, I had insurance that covered our family. It covered 90%. My wife had insurance because she worked at the hospital, but they were not going to pick up the final 10%. And, you know, having a baby life flighted with your wife, I think the life flight back then was just $5,000. I say just, I mean, that's still a lot of money, but it's a lot more now. And then I think by the time it was all said and done, you're talking $100,000 for him to be born at St. Francis and be there for 2.5 weeks. So 10% is still $10,000 that, you know, I was just a youth minister, not making a lot of money. And so her insurance wasn't going to pick up the 10%. So we contacted the state insurance commissioner and he got it done for us personally. So said all that illustration to say, sometimes your senators, well, all the time, your senators and your reps are helping individual families that we don't know about. And so that helps them when it comes time to reelection. If you had a senator that helped you when he's running again for reelection, you're going to probably campaign for him. Whether you join his official campaign or whether you just tell your family and friends, hey, vote for this guy, this woman, she did this for us personally. Incumbents enjoy that privilege. Incumbents also secure what is called pork barrel. This is in your textbook. Pork barrel is where senators and representatives basically get federal money and federal grants to their area. So let's say Muldrow, let's say the town leaders of Muldrow wanted to, well, let's say the community center, Muldrow, do they have a senior community center, a senior center in Muldrow where senior adults can go and get free meals and play dominoes and things like that? Sometimes called the senior center, community center.
I think so.
Okay, we'll say that they do. Most little towns have a senior center. Senior adults can go and get free meals. They'll play dominoes and cards and just spend time together. And they'll have people come in like from the hospitals and do free vaccinations for the senior adults and things like that. So let's say Muldrow Senior Adult Center burns down. The city leaders of Muldrow at the city council. Okay, we're going to contact State Representative Mark Wayne Mullen. We're going to contact Senators Lankford and Inhofe. We're going to ask them to get some federal money to help us rebuild a new senior center because Muldrow doesn't have enough money and we don't want to raise taxes. So let's say Mark Wayne and Senators James and Senator Jim get a grant for Muldrow to build a new senior adult center. That's pork barrel money. I know it sounds funny. I'm not sure exactly the origin of it, but that's pork barrel, where senators and reps will get money, federal money for state or local projects. And that's a lot of credit to an incumbent when it comes time to reelect or comes time for elections. Any questions on those advantages for incumbents? All righty, here's another slide which basically breaks that down once again. How do incumbents serve their people? They represent everybody in their district. They help individual families and people. And then they get the pork for their districts or their states or businesses or cities or whatever it might be. A lot of times incumbents will face people who are weak opponents, people who have never been in politics. They don't know how to organize. They don't have the funds. So that's another reason why incumbents are elected 90% of the time. They just don't have strong opponents coming up against them. And then remember those wonderful things we learned about concerning interest groups, PACs and super PACs. Well, PACs and super PACs, and especially PACs, if you look here, give most of their money to incumbents. Why do you think that is? Why do you think political action committees give most of their money to incumbents?
It's a better investment.
Yeah, why would that be a better investment?
Because they're more likely to succeed.
To what?
They're more likely to succeed.
And that would be why? You're almost there, because they've already been working together. They've already got a relationship. And so a PAC would be thinking, okay, we want, let's just keep our representative in mind here. We want to keep Mark Wayne Mullen in because we already have a relationship with him. We don't want this newcomer to come in and have to start all over with them and try to get them to see things the way we see things. All right, good job. All right, so we're going to move now to how Congress is organized. If you have your textbook and you want to follow along. Let me find my textbook. The organization of Congress is on page 444. And I want you to think of three. This could be a good test question. 3 levels of organization in Congress. First of all, you have the leadership level, the leadership level. So you have 100 senators, right, from 50 states, 2 senators per state. You have 435 representatives. So that's a total of 535 people in Congress. And they are technically, right, the representatives of the 330 million citizens of the United States. So really, they're already, technically, they should have already demonstrated some level of leadership. Because usually people don't elect people who don't have good leadership qualities. So those 535 people should have some level of competency when it comes to leadership. Good speakers, they're motivators, they are good and organized. They have some leadership ability, some leadership qualities. Now, when they all get to DC, there's got to be leadership organization within this group of 535 representatives who are leaders. So that's what we're talking about here. How are the representatives, AKA leaders of the people, organized into leadership? All righty, so in the House of Representatives, there will be so many Republicans and there will be so many Democrats. And there will be one party that has the majority. So that would mean out of 435, one party's going to have 218 or more members, which means they would be the majority. So one of the first officers picked, if not the first officer, is going to be the Speaker of the House. This is the leader that the majority party chooses to be the Speaker of the House. So for example, right now, do you all know who the Speaker of the House is? Do you know who our United States Speaker of the House is? The first woman.
Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi. The first woman to be Speaker, and she's now been Speaker 2 times. She was Speaker when little George Bush was president, and she is Speaker again. So that means the Democratic Party is the majority party in the House. So they elected her because the majority party gets to choose the Speaker of the House. So she is the leader of the House. And where does she rank after Joe Biden and Vice President Harris? Does anybody know? Is she next after Harris, or is she a couple of down from Harris? Take a guess.
She's next, right?
Yes. Nancy Pelosi is second in line to be president if something were to happen to Biden and then something were to happen to Vice President Harris. So the Speaker of the House is a pretty influential governing leader. So after the Speaker of the House, well, let's look at her main duties. She presides over and keeps order in the House, right? Remember her little gavel? She's got a gavel that she bangs on the desk. She names members to all of the select and conference committees. We'll talk about committees here in a little bit. She signs all bills and resolutions that are passed by the House of Reps. Alrighty, what about the Senate? The 100 senators. Who is the leader or the president of the Senate? Does anybody know without looking? In the House, it's called the Speaker of the House. In the Senate, it's called the President of the Senate. Do you think it's the leader of the majority party, like in the House? No, it's not. The president of the Senate is the vice president of the United States. Now, I know that sounds weird, but Kamala Harris or Kamala, I'm not sure how you say her name. She is the president of the Senate. So when the Senate convenes, she has to be there as the presiding officer. And here's her responsibilities. You only thought the vice president didn't do anything. She does, or he does have responsibilities. So Kamala Harris has the same responsibilities as Nancy Pelosi. But she cannot vote when it's time to vote on a piece of legislation, except if there's a 50-50 tie, then she has to break the tie. So technically, there is a advantage to the Democrats right now if there was a tie, although I do think that Democrats have the majority without her. She would break the tie and most likely she would vote with the Democrats. Now, there is another person that is elected to a leadership position, the president pro tem, or this is the senior member. In other words, the one who has seniority, the senior member of the majority party. And president pro tempore really is kind of an honorary title. But let's say Vice President Harris cannot make it to the Senate. Let's say they were going to have a deliberation and a vote tomorrow and she can't make it. Then the president pro tem of the Senate would step in and serve in her absence. Those are the two main leaders of the House and the Senate. Now, both the House and Senate will elect some other people. After the Speaker of the House is elected and after the President pro tem is elected, there will then be a majority leader and a minority leader from each chamber. In other words, after Nancy Pelosi, the Democrats will elect another leader to be the majority leader. In other words, that person leads the Democratic representatives whenever they meet. The Republicans will elect a minority leader. That's the leader of the minority party, in this case, the Republicans. So I know it can be confusing, but just think of it this way. When all of the House of Representatives are gathered together, Democrats and Republicans, Nancy Pelosi is overseeing the meeting. She's the Speaker of the House. She's a Democrat, and she's been elected by the Democrats because they are the majority party. They get to choose the leader of the whole House. But when the House disperses and the Democrats, if they want to have a meeting, which they would call a caucus, where it's just them meeting, just the Democrats, whoever they elected to be the majority leader will preside over the Democratic caucus. When the Republicans go their separate way and have their own meeting, it's called a conference. So when the Republican conference meets, the minority leader will preside over it. And the same way in the Senate. Now, you can read in your textbook about another subsection of leaders called whips. That's right, whips like whipped cream. You can read about them on your own, but they are assistants basically to the majority and minority leaders. Any questions on that first level of congressional organization, party leadership? I know this is riveting stuff. All right, let's move on to probably the most important part. And when I say most important, that's a hint, probably going to be test worthy. The most important level of congressional leadership, and that is the committee system, committees. Let me go to the textbook for this one. Committees really is how Congress gets things done. And there's 4 kinds of committees. Standing committees are the most important arenas of congressional policymaking. In other words, the most important groups when it comes to getting legislation made and into law. Standing committees. They are called standing because they always remain in existence. From one Congress, well, we should say from one congressional session to the next congressional setting, from one Congress to the next Congress that comes along, from one presidential term to another presidential term, standing committees remain. We'll see some of those committees here in a little bit. Matter of fact, let me get to them right now. In other words, they're permanent committees. So you can see these 2 big boxes are standing committees, permanent committees. And if I remember right, I believe there's 17 and 1. Oh, there's 19 standing committees in the House, 16 in the Senate. And if you look closely, you can see that there's the same type of committee in both of them. Both of them have an appropriations committee. Both of them have an armed services committee, budget committee, things like that. So these are permanent committees, thus they're always there. They're always standing. They cover a particular subject, as we just saw, like the budget committee is going to focus on a budget for the United States government. Remember, because Congress has the power of the purse. And that's going to include budget allocations to different federal bureaucracies, budgets for the executive branch, budgets for the legislative branch. Budgets for salaries for all of the branches, things like that. Because the House is the only chamber of the Senate, of the Congress, excuse me. Remember, only the House can introduce bills that have to do with money. The most important standing committees are those that are in charge of financing. A couple of those are the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. The reason the founders wanted the House of Representatives to be where bills come from, or bills with concerning finance, the reason they wanted the House to be the place where bills that concerned money came from was because they were the chamber of the Congress that was closest to the people. All right, that was a mouthful. I hope you understood it. Another important committee that's a standing committee is the House Rules Committee. The House Rules Committee decides the order in which bills come up for a vote on the House floor. So committees are where a lot of times legislation is started. Someone on the House floor or someone on the House of Representatives floor or the Senate floor will propose a new bill, and they will send it to the right committee. And that committee will work on hashing out a bill to eventually come before all the members of the House or all the members of the Senate for a vote. And the House Rules Committee decides which bills will come before all of the Senate or all of the House, and in which order they will come before them. Most standing committees are broken into subcommittees. Here's some more permanent committees, standing committees in the textbook. The next group of committees is select committees. They're usually not permanent. They don't have power to present legislation to the full Congress. You can see here, leaders in Congress, they form select committees when they want to take up issues that fall outside the jurisdictions of existing committees. Or if they want to highlight an issue, or if they want to investigate a particular problem. Right now, there is the January 6th Select Committee that has been investigating the January 6th riots from January 6th, 2021. That is a select committee. When they are done in the next year or so, that committee will dissolve. Joint committees are not committees that deal with cannabis or marijuana. Inside joke there. But joint committees are committees that involve members of from both the Senate and the House. So you got senators and representatives serving on these 4 committees right here. Sounds like a test question. Economic, taxation, library, and printing. These are permanent joint committees, but they do not present legislation. They gather information, They can hold hearings. They can consult experts on those 4 issues. And then there's conference committees. These are also temporary committees whose members are appointed by the Speaker of the House and the presiding officer of the Senate. These committees are responsible to help reach a compromise on a piece of legislation once it has passed through both the House and the Senate, but they haven't been able to reach a consensus. So Nancy Pelosi and I believe I'm not sure who the majority leader is of the Senate, but they would get together and they would appoint a conference committee to come to a compromise. And then so that's the committee system. Any questions? All right, very quickly. Oh, excuse me. The third level of organization in Congress is the staff system. I think I told you there's around 12,000 staffers. Textbook says 11,500, but then there's 2,000 more committee staffers. So looking at over 13,000 staffers for our congressmen and women. Very quickly, what are the responsibilities of Congress? Now that we know they're organized with party leadership and committees and a ton of staff, what are they supposed to do? They make laws. That's one function, right? We know that they are the lawmaking branch of government. They represent. These are the three things that they do. Make laws, represent their states and districts. And so how are those two things tied together? Passing laws that would rightfully represent their constituents, their states, their districts. And then the third thing they do is they have an oversight function. If you'll read closely in your textbook, the legislative branch has some oversight jurisdiction in all 3 branches of government themselves, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. You like my hat there? So any questions on that speed finish of Congress? And you really need to read the chapter as you're doing the worksheet to see how they make a law, the process that it goes through. Starts out on the floor, goes to a committee, might go down to subcommittees. Once the committee's done and has a piece of legislation, it goes back to the floor. It would go over to the other chamber for them to look at. You know, I have to come back and do some tweaking. Eventually it'll go to all leaders on the floor and be passed by Congress. Eventually then go to the president where he could approve it or veto it. Read up on that. Any questions? All right. Have a great Wednesday and Thursday, and we'll look forward to seeing you on Friday with a new Kahoot.